It's a court of the people set up to address injustices that are not recognised by the law. A People's Tribunal sets out to define what justice is through gathering testimony and evidence and identifying culprits and remedies. The People's Tribunal arrives at collective verdicts and demands and agrees a series of commitments to bring these about from those gathered in the room.
I would like to make a statement about the appalling violence that took place during last week's protests outside Parliament. I want first to express my gratitude to those police officers and commanders who put themselves in harm's way. They showed great bravery and professionalism in the face of violence and provocation. It was this bravery that enabled this House to engage unhindered in democratic debate, and I know that the whole House will want to send them our thanks.
So 5 years ago today, on the 9th of December 2010, thousands of students marched on Parliament in a last-ditch attempt to stop MPs from voting to triple fees. This was the culmination of a national wave of protest, of walkouts, of occupations, in opposition to the Coalition's disastrous plans for education.
By the time I got to Millbank, the front entrance had been shattered. I made my way into the lobby as hundreds of us were chanting and occupying the area. We eventually made our way to the roof and took in the magnitude of what was happening at that time.
I was arrested at the student protest at Millbank.
We almost made it to the bottom, but were held by police, who then kettled us in the lobby. After almost an hour, we were photographed and put into police vans. We were held at Charing Cross Police Station. I was also given bail conditions which banned me from entering the borough of Westminster, which, by the way, is most of central London.
I was then released in prison trackies on unfamiliar streets at around 4:30 a.m. with no phone.
Not long after reaching Parliament Square on December the 9th, thousands of protesters found themselves kettled. Police were later to claim that students had broken the route and charged Parliament Square intent on violent disorder. Jody McIntyre, a protester with cerebral palsy, was pulled and dragged from his wheelchair by police. Alfie Meadows, a 21-year-old philosophy student, had to undergo emergency brain surgery to save his life after being hit on the head with a police baton. In all, 78 arrests were made for the 9th of December, and almost 400 students were arrested across 4 main demonstrations in London. 109 people were charged, the vast majority with violent disorder. Violent disorder is one of the most serious public offences that you can be charged with, second only to riot, and it carries a prison sentence of 5 years.
I was on bail for 6 months and ended up with a caution for aggravated trespass, which is still causing me employment problems.
However, since leaving the student movement, the consequences of this non-criminal conviction have caused me problems. I was looking to pursue a career in law, partly due to the whole experience. I haven't been able to volunteer in areas I'd like to, like volunteering in prisons, and trying to volunteer with young people caused even more problems.
Young people hoping for more lenient sentences pled guilty to their charges and went to prison. I was in court when a young 19-year-old college student was sentenced to 10 months in Holloway Women's Prison for simply waving a placard stick at police lines. A GP who'd been on the protest had picked the placard stick up that had landed on him to throw it forward, was also found guilty of violent disorder and was struck off the register for life, unable ever again to work in the NHS. In other words, the vast majority were found not guilty and acquitted and exonerated by juries. So now we're coming together to demand a public inquiry, because without lessons learned and proper accounting, many students who suffered criminal penalties will continue to be affected. But crucially, because if we don't, the kind of tactics that we saw used against the protesters there will continue to be used whenever a protest or a demonstration or a movement looks like it actually might have a chance of winning.
The Director of Finance at Goldsmiths came to our board meeting to give us an impression of, the state of finance in Goldsmiths at the moment. And as you all know, it was pretty grim, very depressing stats. all looks really, really bad. We're in massive debt, apparently. And so one of my colleagues bravely piped up at the end of this really depressing presentation and said, what can we, as staff, do to help? What can we do? The Director of Finance rightly pointed out, I, as Director of Finance, should not be telling you, as staff, what to do. Pause. But I'd like to point out that during World War I, the staff at Goldsmiths took a pay cut.
So, to give you some context of what's happened financially here and across the country, in 2010, what happened was there was a fundamental shift in who paid for university. Before that, the onus was largely on the public. We had public universities and they were funded by public money. 2/3 of universities were funded by that public money. What happened in 2010 is that shifted massively, where 2/3 of university funding later become funded by student debt, which is not only unsustainable for the individual, but we were told at the time it was necessary to cut the deficit. But actually what it did was it increased the national debt, because the payback on it was worse than they thought. The government thought they'd lose 30 to 32 pence in the pound, and everyone they dealt out, it's probably going to be more like 50 pence in each pound. In a DSC meeting last year, we were told by the college secretary, we're not running an even balance sheet, we're going into deficit quite quickly. Next slide. Well, here are the finances, just taking this public information. You can look up Goldsmiths financial statements, and if you look at 2012, 2013, you see there's a surplus of just over £4 million, and then last year it's just over £6.5 million. So where's this money going? Who's profiting from this fundamental shift? I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to let you work out yourself, but no, so here are some costs of senior staff, okay? And if you look from 2005-06 to the last academic year, in that time, the wardens had a £100,000 increase in wages. Now, again, I'm not an economist, but I think that's above inflation. And to be fair, we did have 5 high-paid staff, so on the finance sheets it says high-paid staff. We only had 5 of them, and now they're 4.
This was the time when it became very obvious that more and more parents were accompanying their offspring to open days. Labels such as helicopter parents were bandied about, and some places started producing information specifically for parents. They were talked about as stakeholders. So different from days gone by, where leaving university meant autonomy and going it alone. Now there was a sea of anxious parents worrying how their child could cope with such debt.
During the summer, the college sold the leases of 3 halls of residence to Campus Living Villages, CLV. CLV is an Australian firm run by CEO Simon Hickey with gross assets worth $2 billion. This news was presented to the trade unions the day after the deal was signed. We subsequently found out that the deal had been the result of 2 years of secret negotiations. Staff working in the halls were offered huge voluntary severance packages. We can assume this is because CLV didn't want to keep an existing Goldsmiths staff, as they would be on much better terms and conditions than CLV staff. The leases are for 50 years. The return for the college, after fees, is £22 million. Rents for the next 50 years from the campus accommodation for these 3 halls of residence go to CLV, not the college.
I want to ask a very simple but crucial question, which is, who runs Goldsmiths? So in other words, who makes the decisions about the strategic direction as well as the more day-to-day operations, the running of the college, and according to what criteria? Now, in order to understand who runs the college, it's probably worth starting with who doesn't run the college. Or actually, you might be scared of the idea of staff running the college, but actually it's not the staff. You can see the pattern here. Should it be the heads of departments, of which we have some fantastic heads of departments, but they really operate to guidelines and targets that are handed down to them. How about students?
Oh, definitely.
Our customers? It's not students. So who does run the college? What we have is a senior management team that Jamie has actually spelled out in terms of some of the wages. This is composed of 8 people who are tasked, you can see there, tasked with operational management. They are the day-to-day people making sure that the strategic decisions take place at the supreme decision-making level, which is college council. There are some excellent people on that council, but if you see the full list that we have at the moment, by and large, it is not those qualities that we think are most important to Goldsmiths. In other words, a commitment to education, creativity and culture. It appears from that list that what really counts is a background in the law, accountancy and finance. Now, all of this discussion about decision making should be about ensuring one particularly important thing, which is that the college fulfills its promise to deliver high quality education. But if you're to choose one random person, the former Universities Minister David Willits, who shaped the whole architecture that we are still living under, for him it wasn't about providing more resources, it wasn't about more staff or lower staff-student ratios. It was best summed up in one of his finest phrases, that the way to make sure this happens, that we deliver high-quality education, is by unleashing the forces of consumerism. That is the best way, the best single way we've got of restoring high academic standards. I don't know if anyone wants to take up. Would you like to comment on that?
I feel moved. I feel moved by this.
Led up to this tribunal, a lot of us talked about the intensification of all the invisible work that we seem to be doing. Everybody is knackered. Why? What's happened? What is the nature of this reproductive labour and how has it changed over the last 5 years? What constitutes reproductive labour in this institution? Cleaning, IT services, nurseries, security, care work of all kinds. So what is the work that reproduces our institution and why is it always devalued and mostly done by certain bodies, often women and people of colour?
2010, the college decided to close down the nursery. The nursery had been looking after children of staff and students for 30 years. The college nursery had allowed students who are parents to study and for staff to have their children close by. The college now only provides an old rundown building in Lewisham Way that's not disability friendly. You know, it's falling apart, but we're still there. Many parents on low salaries just can't afford to send their children to us. This is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. They said the nursery, and it does not support our core business at all. So,
Dear tutor, I'm sorry to ask, but I was wondering if we could meet out of class this week. I'm worried about my visa status, coursework, finances, workload, career prospects, stolen laptop, pregnancy, depression, suicidal tendencies, anxiety disorder, inability to understand the lectures, housing problems, ailing parents, recent breakup. Talking things over would really, really help. I'm sure we can do this over Skype, but if you were free to talk in person, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you, student.
I get at least one email like this a day. There's not time to cover students' problems in class, nor would it be appropriate to do so. Tutorials are short enough as it is, and already students complain that they should be longer. I'm a fractional hire, and my teaching and admin load makes no accommodation for extracurricular counseling. So meetings take place over coffee, over lunch, after hours. Not only do I struggle to find the time, sometimes I wonder if I'm the right person to do this. 2 students recently have spoken to me of attempting suicide while at Goldsmiths. In both cases, I recommended them to student counseling, but with counselors under huge pressure, students found it hard to get an appointment. And then only the bare minimum was offered. Knowing that a student is mentally precarious while doubting my competence to help adds to my sense of anxiety and frustration.
Satellite. We now have an audio recording. Mark Fisher. Who's going to talk about stress and anxiety. Are you there, Mark?
How can lecturers support stressed students when we too are so overstressed? Ever since 2010, a wave of panic has spread through higher education. In place of management, there has been a series of frantic gestures, mechanical reflexes, threatening postures. The message emerging from the frenzy has been clear and unrelenting. Work harder, work longer, do more administration, more marketing, or you won't have a job anymore. Teaching and learning are the last things on lecturers' minds, as we are required to become hawkers and hucksters, plugging the gaps in funding. The position is plain. Reading and thinking are luxuries that universities can't afford to pay for anymore. But if we don't have time to think, who does? Everyone bends under the pressure. Some crack fatally. An Imperial College professor commits suicide because he fails to bring in enough revenue from research. Many others must be on the brink. Our overpaid superiors pretend to read PDFs while colleges and universities fall apart. Students paying £9,000 a year sit on stairs. A new member of staff says she has blacked out the window on her office door so she can sleep and cry. We cower in our offices, experiencing our inability to cope with the impossible workload as our personal failure and shame, telling each other that there is no time to talk.
Over 10% of the student population encountered emotional and psychological difficulties this year.
Fortunately,
the service was there to support students to succeed, saving the college millions of pounds in lost fees, as many students with assistance were able to complete their courses rather than interrupt or withdraw.
Unfortunately,
at the beginning of the academic year, the counselling service was short-staffed, which meant we could not respond to clients as quickly as we would have liked.
In direct response to the commercialisation of our universities and the commodification of education, we, Occupy Goldsmiths, hereby demand the following from Goldsmiths management. Number 1, counselling service. Recruit more counsellors to meet demand, to be able to see a tangible reduction in the waiting list of the services, to resist the planned restructure, and to secure within the services and stop any redundancies.
12 to 13, the number of clients presenting issues of self-harm was 5. 2014 to 15, the number was 218. 2012-13, the number of clients presenting issues of anxiety was 223. But in 14-15, it was 363 who were anxious. 2012-13, clients presenting issues of depression, anger, mood change, 167. 2014-15, 243.
I don't have any friends on the course. I don't have time to socialise. I can't make any work.
My parents have put off their retirement, so I've got to get it first.
I have to get it first. How do I get first?
I feel too anxious to go to seminars. What should I do?
Every time I come to college, I have a panic attack.
I don't know how I'm going to get through the next week. My counselling starts in 3 months. I don't know what I'm paying for anymore.
I'll go on, Steve.
I'm really scared. I've been here for 4 years, built my friends and community here, but the law says I have to go back to my home country where I know nobody this summer.
It's only me, no one else feels like this. I'm the only one in the group who can't speak.
I can't afford to have a social life. I have to get it first.
Anybody else? Thank you. I want to die.
This chair comes from an office of a senior tutor, and the senior tutor left a statement about the chair. This is the chair in my office that students sit on when they come to tell me they can't cope, are anxious, sometimes seriously depressed, or can't see a way out. 2 years ago, a student who sat in this chair later took his own life. Every time a student sits in that chair, I wonder if they'll be next.
But basically, we were saying, like, in a way, the day has reminded us what was at stake when people protested and why, ultimately, it is so important that we defend the right to protest. I know it sounds obvious, but really to call on everyone to play their part in doing that, in defending people, you know, if and when they're criminalised. So think about how your networks and your groups could be part of supporting that work. Being aware of the broader ways in which the right to dissent is coming under attack, and the way in which processes of criminalisation are taking place on our own campuses, and the way in which that is being used to, in general, limit dissent, but in particular to target Muslim students. And there's lots of examples of school children, wearing Palestine badges and being reported, raising issues about foreign policy and wars being reported, which is obviously a very relevant issue now. So basically, to encourage people to do what they can to campaign against prevent.
For the money, we want free education. We want a lot more transparency about how the decisions are made and what the breakdown of the money is spent on, including students' fees.
We want to know how those decisions are made at college level, at departmental level and at school level. We want to now look at the wage differential in the college. And then we also want to look at overseas student fees and look at why they keep rising. And we want the university to campaign for the rights of overseas students, visas and conditions.
Right. We want a far, far wider process of consultation. We don't wish to be reactive to decisions that are already made. We wish to be part of a consultation process, and we don't wish to have that under gag order once a consultation process has or has not happened. So we want sort of to have much more of a say.
We want lunch hours paid, so we can actually with free lunch, so we can actually start talking to each other, feeling less isolated, less atomized, actually recognizing the texture of each other's lives, what we're doing that isn't sort of refable or productive. And we want Goldsmiths, we're fed up with the Goldsmiths brand not reflecting what actually happens at Goldsmiths in terms of everything from working conditions to the kinds of contracts that the support staff are on.
Yeah, we want an equitable, transparent work model for everyone, and consultation on the working conditions of non-academic staff as well as academic staff. And free childcare.
We want to collectivise the experience of mental health in the university, and we had lots of different sort of discussions about how to do that, but we really want to accept that anxiety is systemic and think about ways of dealing with that. And so we will think about how to raise the visibility of these issues, allow people to get it wrong, and kind of acknowledge anxiety at the outset of teaching. So it's really to think through how we can sort of take these issues forward, make them visible, but also have them collectivised.
And people may want to mill and talk and sign up on these things. So can I just say, just close the space, say thank you ever so much for a wonderful turnout, and should we be a bit self-congratulatory?